Oh, snap. Breaking rumors. Breaking rumors. I want to call it news, but we just don't know how authentic everything is. But we most definitely going to eventually get to the bottom of it. But it looks like we got beef. What's beef? Beef is when I see you. Guaranteed to be in ICU. All right, man. Breaking rumors. It looks like Frank Martin is parting ways with trainer Derrick James. Oh, wow. I wouldn't have seen this one coming in a million years. And again, it's just rumors, nothing 100% concrete, but I do have some audio, and shout out to Spit Bucket Podcast, where they are reporting from supposedly extreme close sources to the situation that Frank Martin potentially parting ways with trainer Derrick James. Of course, that's Errol Spence trainer, and there's some trouble in paradise. Let's talk about it. What up, YouTube? Big T.O. Heavy Bag Boxing TV, man. Get your goof ass in here. Hit the bag. Hit that like button for your boy. That helps the channel. You know, I appreciate that love. Shout out my gang, man. D1, Merc, 1ML21, Skinny JT, Black Jesus. My guy, Troy Jack, Keywan, Rebel Life, Modern King, Letitia, YK World. My boy, Tyrese Celestin. All right, man, I want to get into this audio so you guys will be on the same page as me and we can kind of figure out together what's going on. Let's go ahead and give it a listen.
There is trouble in paradise. There is trouble in paradise between Frank Martin, Coach Derrick James, and even Errol Spence, Man Down Promotions. Frank Martin is the guy at Man Down Promotions. That's pretty much what Errol's banking on at this point. There's been, from what we hear, again, don't shoot the messenger, he's a very reliable source. Frank Martin's been upset about that. Frank Martin has been throwing out the idea about going back to his original coach, two-time Indiana Golden Glove champ Ike Boyd, and his father, Frank, also. So it's kind of a three-man team. There were whispers that Frank was wanting to go back to his team. Here is where the separation came up of all of the news that's going out there. From what we've heard this morning, Frank Martin never negotiated that deal. It was Errol and Derrick, from what we've heard, selling this as a package deal. I'm going to train you. We're going to promote you. We're going to manage.
And real quick, because I hate to interrupt the audio, but what he says, Frank Martin was potentially trying to get back with his old team. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Derrick James is training so many fighters now. And when you have these high-profile fighters like Derrick James is responsible for training, like a Anthony Joshua and a Ryan Garcia, a Frank Martin and a Earl Spence Jr., and a Jermell Charlo, there's only one Derrick James, and he's going to be responsible for getting all of these guys prepared for their fights. So there's not a lot of time that he can invest into just one fighter, right? For example, like Coach Calvin and Javante Tank Davis, he can really pretty much dedicate everything into Tank Davis, whereas the reigning trainer of the year in Derrick James, he really has to chop that time up between all of these extremely high-profile fighters. All right, I'm going to go ahead and finish. I'm sorry, I hate to interrupt.
From what we've heard this morning, Frank Martin never negotiated that deal. It was Errol, his team, his father, Frank, also. So it's kind of a three-man team. There were whispers that Frank was wanting to go back to his team. Here is where the separation came up of all of the news that's going out there. From what we've heard this morning, Frank Martin never negotiated that deal. It was Errol and Derrick, from what we've heard, selling this as a package deal. I'm going to train you. We're going to promote you. We're going to manage you legally. You can't do it. You can't package it like that. But they heard whispers. They wanted to lock down this fight, regardless of Frank Frank wasn't involved. They thought $1 million payday would be great. He would love it. Frank obviously saw the agreement, saw the news, and said, wait a second, this is Shakur Stevenson we're talking about. If I'm going to go put myself at risk like this, I need 1.5, I need 2. So that's where that came from, where he pulled out and where the dunk mania started. So, yeah, you can say, all right, he walked away from $1 million payday. But, man, you can't be mad at the man. He was never involved in negotiations from what we heard. This was Derrick. This was Errol. You know, no Frank Martin, there is no man down promotions. Not right now, there isn't. If they know there's trouble, this is the part where we're sprinkling in here. If they know there's trouble, let's lock them down for one big fight. Let's make our money. And if we part ways after that, at least we have the payday. That's how I'm interpreting.
That sprinkle was a valid point. Now, for those of you who are following, the whole issue with the Shakur Stevenson fight, where, of course, everybody began to call Frank Martin a duck. What they're saying is that it appears that Frank Martin had no input, no interactions with the actual negotiating part. It doesn't seem like Errol Spence and Derrick James relayed any messages toward, back and forth between camps. It appears that Frank Martin just was oblivious to what was going on as far as negotiations. Now, I hate to think that that's the kind of ship that Errol Spence is trying to run at Man Down Promotions. Now, of course, most of us, we know how this thing works. A lot of the times when a promotional company signs a fighter, the fighter pretty much fights who you tell them to fight, right? You hear fighters all the time say, hey, they put them in front of me, you know what I mean? And I do my job, you know what I'm saying? I fight who they put in front of me, right? That's a lot, a lot of the times that's what fighters tell you because, a lot of the times they don't get to choose who they fight next. A lot of the times that's what the promotional company does. So when I hear this news, it sounds like what traditionally promotional companies do. But I'm pretty sure that Frank Martin felt like he had a different relationship and business relationship with Errol Spence and probably even a Derrick James. So maybe this came as a surprise to Frank Martin. And for Frank Martin, everybody knows that fighting a Shakur Stevenson is extremely risky. He would probably go into that fight being a really big underdog. And let's be honest, more than likely, maybe he loses. Probably he loses, right? So in Frank Martin's mind, he's saying, hey, man, $1 million, that's just not enough for me to lose my O. Maybe change the trajectory of my career and fighting somebody as dangerous as a Shakur Stevenson. I'm going to need more money. Now, this is what they're saying. This is what they're saying. The close sources to them is feed the information that they're being fed. So with that being in mind, Frank Martin went on to ask for more money. And ultimately, that's what killed the negotiations for the Shakur Stevenson fight. And of course, that's when all of the duck talk comes out. Now, real quick, what I want y'all to realize is when these fighters are offered this money, and yeah, it's their biggest paydays, right? But you got to understand that they don't get all of that money. You got to understand that training camp got to be paid for, coaches got to be paid for, taxes have to be paid out of that money. So what he will walk away from, or what he walks away with from that $1 million is probably a pocket change. Maybe $300,000 to $400,000 of that money may go into Frank Martin's pocket. And I know he probably weighed the options and was like, dang, maybe that's just not worth it to potentially change the trajectory of my career by losing to Shakur Stevenson. How far does that knock me back in the rankings, right? How far does that knock me back from reaching my goals? So he's taking all of this in consideration and not having that communication with Errol Spence and Derrick James. That probably was the biggest issue. As far as him wanting to part ways with Derrick James, it makes sense, especially if Derrick James just doesn't have the time, which the same thing was said for Eddie Reynoso and Ryan Garcia. Ryan Garcia felt like Eddie Reynoso didn't have the proper time to dedicate to him in his career. I think he's going to find himself maybe in that same situation with a Derrick James. And of course, Frank Martin definitely probably feels the same way when you need a lot of face time, especially with Derrick James, who's more than likely the pad man doing his training with his fighters as well. But the slick part about it is, which is what he mentioned, was the fact that Derrick James is basically Errol Spencer's the promoter, and Derrick James, it appears, is the trainer / manager. So that big part of Frank Martin's purse, which is almost half of it that goes to the promotional company, would be getting split between the manager and the promotional company, which would be Derrick James and Errol Spence. Now, listen, man, we all know the promotional game is a cutthroat business when it comes to the fighters. They got to, the promotional company and manager and everybody's got to make their money. But again, you don't know what kind of relationship Frank Martin thought he had with these guys. And it does make sense that if they were going to fall out, if there was going to be some kind of beef, or if Frank Martin was to be disgruntled about anything, to go ahead and lock in the Shakur Stevenson fight, let that play out, have a big payday, and then maybe they can part ways. But it looks like they just may be parting ways before or now there is no fight and they're going to go ahead and part ways. We don't know exactly how true this is. We don't know what the relationship between him and Errol Spence is. We don't know about the whole man down situation. I don't know what's left on his contract. It's a lot of question marks out there. But listen, Frank Martin is the flagship fighter of Man Down Promotions. As of right now, I don't know any other Man Down promotion fighters. So if Frank Martin chooses to walk away or be disgruntled and try and get out of his situation with Man Down, then, as of right now, there is no Man Down, or at least notable fighters for Man Down that we all have heard of. But you guys let me know what you think in the comment section, man. Beef, trouble in paradise. Frank Martin maybe has an issue with the boss man himself, the big fish, and the trainer, Derrick Johnson. We got to see how this story develops. That's all I got for y'all on this one, man. Big T.O. Heavy Bag. Talk to him, Roger.
Most motherfuckers don't know shit about boxing.